Hello, and welcome to On the Marie Curie Couch, the podcast that aims to break down taboos and start open, honest conversations about death and dying. I'm Jason Davidson. I'm a social worker by profession, and I've worked in palliative care, hospice care, and bereavement support services for more than a decade. Each episode, we'll be speaking to a well-known guest to find out about how they feel about their own mortality and how their personal experience of bereavement has shaped the way they live their life. Today, I'm on the Marie Curie Couch with Jason Isaacs. Jason's the third of four sons, born in Liverpool to Jewish parents. The family moved to London when Jason was 11. He studied law at Bristol University, then moved into acting after becoming involved in the Drama Society. Jason's gone on to star in many Hollywood films, including Event Horizon, Armageddon, The End of the Affair, and The Patriot, as well as playing Lucius Malfoy in all 8 Harry Potter films. Jason lives in London with his wife, the filmmaker Emma Hewitt, and their 2 daughters, Ruby and Lily. I'll be talking to Jason today via a video call. Jason Isaacs, welcome to the Marie Curie Couch.
Thanks very much for having me. It's an odd thing to look forward to having a chat about subjects that are so serious, but I spend so much of my life nowadays when I'm doing Zooms or chats or promoting things or raising money for charities, trying to be funny. I spent my entire life trying to make people laugh and making little gags. So it's an odd feeling knowing that this was going to happen, that I should drop all that and try and have a serious chat.
You might not need to be serious all the way through the chat.
Well, no, but I could also crack gags all the way through. But I've listened to some of the others, particularly Greg, who's a friend of mine. I thought it was the most beautiful and moving and inspiring conversation you had. I have nothing to even approach that, but I'm really glad that I got to listen to it.
Can I start today, Jason, by asking you to share with us or tell us about this significant death you've experienced in your life?
I suppose it's going to have to be my mum. I thought about it. There's a few people in my life that died, but I spent so much of my life avoiding it. So many times there were opportunities to be present for people, and I ran away. I rationalised reasons why I couldn't be somewhere, or couldn't see them that much, or I don't know if it was conscious, but I just didn't want to be around it and tried to avoid it. For a long, long time. And, I lived through the time when people had AIDS, and I had a friend die and actually flew to England to have a party. And there's a perfectly justifiable reason why I couldn't get there or make it. But looking back, I think I've always avoided it. So my mum died a few years ago, and I was really privileged to be able to be present for quite a lot of it. I mean, for the process whereby she faded and then died. And I was so, so grateful that I'd changed and that life threw me this, availability. So it'll be my mum.
What do you think you were avoiding?
I think I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to be confronted by it. I thought it would, I don't know, I thought it would traumatize me. When I was younger, I was high a lot of the time. I took a lot of drugs for a very long time. And that skews and magic mixes your emotions up anyway, and you're not living in any kind of reality. And I think I avoided all kinds of reality, and there is nothing more real than death. And being able to look someone in the eyes and not distract them with gags or with some way of turning it around and being able to just engage properly with what it is and let it sit with both of you was something that was far, far from my skill set and my self-knowledge. And I was that thing, when you're younger, you feel immortal and you don't want to be reminded of mortality. I mean, this is in retrospect. At the time, I'm sure I would find all kinds of things that sounded sensible and reasonable. But the truth is that I ran from it.
When you were younger, as a family, were there conversations about death and dying? Was it something that was open, or was it something that you were sheltered from, kept from, wasn't discussed?
My family didn't have, still don't have, serious conversations with each other about anything, certainly about the more profound issues in life. I grew up Jewish, for instance, very Jewish, in the sense that all the rituals surrounded us. But we never had a conversation about faith. I don't think any of us believed in God or any of it. It was a kind of tribal ritual thing. I don't remember any serious conversations that touched on the bigger questions of life. The only thing I took from my mum, I guess mostly, was that the point of life is service. You know, I saw that. She's never talked about it, but I just saw that my mother threw herself. She was of that generation of women, most of whom didn't work. But she could have run a country. You know, she could have run a planet. And instead she poured all of this slightly disturbed energy into trying to save everyone, everywhere. Slightly neglecting her family at the same time and getting no credit from us for it. But I think in the absence of conversation, what I took from them, one of the reasons I'm here talking to you today and that I've been involved with Marie Curie and lots of other charities, is it's the only source of real satisfaction in life. The only thing, apart from close, loving relationships with people, it's the only thing that fills the hole. It's the only thing that makes you feel like you're a worthwhile member of the planet, I think. And I didn't learn that through words. I just learned that by osmosis. From my mum, who was an amazingly difficult woman. So when we talk about her dying and at the end of her life, she wasn't a saint. She did lots of things for lots of people and saved lots of people. In making that omelette, she broke every egg she ever came across.
Can we go to your mum's illness? I mean, how did your mum die?
So she'd started to get some. She was at 80, I think. No, she was 79, and she'd been a very big woman all of her life. I come from a family with a bunch of addictive disorders. Hers manifest in eating, I think, and she started to lose weight, lost a lot of weight, and they did various investigative things, including a stomach operation, which was really the beginning of the end, from which she never recovered. And this extraordinary thing happened. Life aligned all the dominoes for me. I was offered a television series in Israel, where my mum lived, had gone to live with my dad years ago. And she was clearly getting sicker, and I was filming, and they couldn't find the source of it. She did various scans. Nobody ever came out and said, your mum's riddled with cancer. And yet it was clearly obvious. I've got doctors, and I've got a brother who's a doctor, a nephew who's a doctor. It was clear that she was having trouble recovering from this operation, but numbers of tests never seemed to yield any results, which is either mysterious, or maybe she had meetings they didn't tell us, or certainly nobody, including my father, knew. But she was not getting better. And to add into the mix, she had some kind of early or low-level dementia for the last year or two, which meant that she was very grumpy and angry and doubting a lot that other people were giving her the full picture. But she was so bright, she covered up most of it by quickly changing subjects or getting very upset and leaving the room. So it was very difficult to get her to engage with that. Consequently, it was very difficult to get any real medical facts out of her. And she wanted to come home. My father couldn't cope with her. So we were trying to find somewhere for her to live, and she wouldn't go. She was very grumpy is the wrong word. It's a kind of a childish word, but it was difficult. So we found an old age home with a medical ward in it, and she said, you're trying to pack me off somewhere. And my dad, in an unbelievably heroic move, said, no, I'll move in with you, although he was perfectly well. And there was a private room with 2 beds in it, and they moved in there. And just when they moved in, bombs started going off in Israel. Rockets started coming across from Gaza. This is 2014. And the production that we were shooting obviously shut down. The insurers shut it down. They sent everyone home. And I got to stay just at the moment my mum moved into this place. And she was there for months, fading away. Not quite understanding why she wasn't getting better, but, continually talking to doctors and stuff. And everybody around knew, not because we had a diagnosis, but because it was clear that she was fading. And I got to be with her there, and various brothers flew in at various stages, and my wife and kids flew out for a little bit until she died, and we buried her. And I got a phone call saying the show's back on, we're shooting in Croatia. And I got back on a plane, and I went and carried on filming. So there was this gap appeared in my frankly over-busy life. I wouldn't have been able to accommodate it otherwise, where I got to be there every day. And it was just, I'm not a believer, but it was a godsend. It was a miracle.
So there was no conversations about what was happening because there was a lack of information, or was there a lack of information and no conversations?
Yes, there were conversations between the brothers and my dad and our various wives all the time, but there was no actual scientific confirmation. But you'd have to have been an idiot not to see that my mum was fading, and of course near the end she was skeletal. But there was no conversation with her about it. She did occasionally get confused and say, I'm not getting well, but there was never any point at which she got to engage with the fact that the doors were closing. I think she must have sensed it, but she wasn't a woman who held back. She did at one point put my kids and my brother's kids, or 4 little girls, together on the bed and say something that, of course, they don't remember because they're kids. But she'd done a lot in her life, saved a lot of people, and she said, just want to tell you one thing, girls. You can achieve anything. You can do anything. Never, ever let anybody tell you. And she wasn't talking about work. She went, you can change the world if you believe in it hard enough and you work hard enough. And I remember thinking, go out on that, because we all dealt with that thing of, you felt terrible, but she was obviously going to die, and it was taking a long time. I mean, some people die for years, but it was difficult going to this room every single day for months. And I thought, I hope my girls remember that. That'll be the last thing, that she says. Look at her, there's nothing left. But as anybody listening to this who's been around people dying knows, the instinct to live and to fight and survive, particularly in a warrior like my mum, keeps them around for a long time.
What kind of conversations were you and your brothers, were you and your dad having?
This is where it gets tricky for me, because I've listened to some of these podcasts and people have life-changingly open and vulnerable and honest conversations, but my family aren't like that. And so I don't know. I don't know that we were engaging with pre-grief. I mean, there's a thing about, even when people are dying obviously in front of you and you know how it's going to end, it still shocks you. And for me at least, and I think for all of us, it doesn't really affect you then there. In the Jewish religion, you have to arrange a funeral the next day. So you're fully in the admin and bureaucracy of it straight away. So it's a good period of time before you realise that person isn't there to call. That person, there's moments you go, oh, she'd like this. Oh, no, she wouldn't like this. She's not around. So we had conversations about what we were going to have for dinner. We had conversations about how long was it going to go on. Should we extend the thing for another month? We're not a family that has those profound conversations. When we do, we're all very cynical and cut it short, or we're from Liverpool. So every time you open your mouth, it ought to be a gag, or it ought to be making fun of someone else, or else it's a wasted word. I don't know that we took solace or prepared ourselves. I don't know if you ever can prepare yourself. We were just, the most important thing was that we were there. So we're not very good with words. I don't know that we comforted each other. We were supporting each other. I don't know what we were doing. But the fact is that we were there. We were able to be there. I have one brother who's a psychiatrist, another who's retired. They managed to suspend lots of their life and be there intermittently. I was there permanently. And then my wife did something brilliant. She arrived and she walked into the room and she went, what's the matter with you? What's the matter with you and your brothers? Let's make this room nice. Let's change the lighting. Let's put some pictures on the wall. Let's get some music your mum likes. If she's going to die here, let's make it a lovely room full of memories. And she just took control of us all and changed the mood entirely. And she said, let's have relatives come. Let's have a picnic. Let's make this. There were French windows, amazingly, in a little courtyard, and you could hear the birds. She went, open the windows. Get a little table outside, make it nice. And that changed everything in a way. My wife arriving and going, you're all just a bunch of idiots. This is not a medical procedure. This is someone leaving their life. And we did that. And so, I don't know that I do know that we didn't, and maybe still haven't had conversations of any great significance that if you saw them written down, you would take solace or strength from. But far more important that we were there, we were able to hold a hand, tell stories. She had this friend who came in and put hand cream on her every day. And I didn't understand at the time. And now, of course, I understand it was just to hold her hand and rub. She didn't need hand cream. Her hand wasn't dry or anything. It was just the comfort of that. And there was this incredible nurse there in this place who volunteered. She was older than my mum. I mean, she's got to be 80 something. She'd retired and come back because she missed caring. And like I say, I've listened to some of your podcasts, and I work with whatever on behalf of Marie Curie, because I think what they do and what they provide, the kind of love and comfort they provide, is extraordinary. But we didn't have Marie Curie; we were in Israel, but there was somebody who came in every day and just loved my mum. Sometimes in ways that we couldn't. Taking her to the loo and washing her down in the bed and stroking her hair, and she just gave her love. And we tried to give her love, but we're a family that are maybe not so great at that, and didn't want to remind her that she was dying, I suppose. So we chatted to her like she had a long illness from which she'd eventually come home. But this nurse just looked her deep in the eyes. She'd obviously seen lots of people pass, and it was. I remember just thinking, she did it because that was her. She understood what it gave her to come and be of comfort. And I think it inspired the rest of us as well, who were in that room every day.
And you used words like love, that the nurse came in and provided. And I think the hand cream, the touch, and the intimacy as well. I was really struck, and it just got me thinking about environments and the environments in which people die, and how when your wife turned up, she wanted to create a different environment. She came in and had a sense of something that she knew she could impact and change that would benefit everybody, including your mum. And that's really interesting, isn't it, about the environment?
It is. Well, her granny used to come and stay with us at Christmas, and then we begged her to live with us, but and eventually she stayed and didn't go home quite well enough. She'd fallen and broken a hip, and we converted a room downstairs, so there was no steps or anything, and she got sick and died here in our house. And I was making a film. I was backwards and forwards all the time, and I think her granny, her mum, my wife, and my daughters, 4 generations of women, were in that room all the time, making it nice, brushing her hair, doing her nails, putting music on that she liked, and providing memories, knowing that she was going. They did know she was dying. And I remember I just got on a plane to go back to America. Every time I had 3 days off, I'd fly home. It was whatever. It was expensive, difficult. Who cares? I came home to provide some support for my wife, really, not for my grandmother-in-law. And I got on a plane. I got off in New Mexico, and there's this huge rainbow. And I phoned up my wife. I went, "Is she gone? I don't want to sound like I'm in like some Sunday afternoon soap, but and she was crying and crying. I said, don't let the kids go in. And she went, "The kids are in there. They're dressing her. They're putting sweets in their pockets. They're doing her hair." Of course, I hadn't seen a dead body until I was in my 30s, but my kids, it was Gigi, they called her, and they'd been with her every day, and then she wasn't there anymore, but they knew that she cared, that she had the right lipstick on and stuff, and they were completely undisturbed by that, undisturbed to see my mum dead as well, Very different attitude, but I think my wife maybe learnt from that, or maybe never had the barriers there that, in the first place, that I would have had, and slight revulsion and fear of being around it.
And sometimes an opportunity, to try it out and to be brave and to see how it makes us feel. And I think often for people, it's not something that you're going to have to experience, hopefully. Lots of times in your life. We know some people do more than others, but actually, yeah.
Well, it's slightly magical. I feel everybody should get to experience it. It sounds weird and patronising. What I mean is that everybody used to die at home with their relatives. That's how people died forever. And now you go, I was just listening this morning, the statistic that, 80% of the NHS spend, or 70% is on the last 2 years of people's lives, because they go to hospital and they're wired up, and they, maybe you don't get the food you want when you want it, and there's no comfort, and you're in a ward. And if you could be at home, if you knew you were dying, I mean, that's a hard thing to say for anyone, but if you could be at home and the relatives around you have space and time and a good enough relationship, how much better to fade looking into the eyes of people you love than looking at a fluorescent light. So yeah, but I felt incredibly privileged to be there. I was actually holding my mum's hand as she took her last breath and just stopped breathing. I felt slightly cheated of conversations that, should be carved in stone and put on the wall, but I'm not sure we would have said anything particularly profound or interesting, So, and my mum had this dementia, so I don't know that it would have been wise, because we debated with each other whether to say to her, Mum, you're dying, and I don't know if you'll be around much longer, so you must say what are the things you want to say or do before then. It didn't feel right. Something rather magical happened, actually. My mum was a very difficult woman in lots of ways. She had a huge heart, but she also was cracked and damaged in the way lots of interesting people are. And I had lots of old resentments, things I would want out, things if I was writing the bad version of this as a play, that you would finally have out. That would, but towards the end, all of her spikiness and difficulty and defensiveness and all the stuff that the dementia had accelerated faded. She became like an incredibly sweet 8-year-old child, incredibly grateful to everybody and incredibly loving. And so there was no point. Not that there would ever have been a point, but there was no point trying to bring up and lay to rest old ghosts, because she was just angelic at the end. For the last weeks and months, she was nothing like the woman she'd been for many, many decades. And at the time, I remember discussing this with my brothers, going, it's weird, you can't even have the big serious conversations you want to have, to somehow. But of course, we were given exactly what we needed. They would have been destructive and unhelpful and never go the way you want them to go anyway. And she was stripped away of all the stuff that we all layer on that we think defines who we are, and was back to something very, very pure. And it was such a privilege to watch it and to be around it.
So you were there and you were holding her hand, and were there other family members present? Yeah,
we're all in the room. She'd done, I don't know if I believe any of this, but she's got 4 sons, and 2 of them, 3 of us live in England. One, my brothers lived in Israel, and the other 2 were backwards and forwards. I was able to stay there because my television series had shut down, so I just decamped. And they'd come backwards and forwards, and she was clearly near the end, and she waited, I think, until my eldest brother, who's always been the kind of patriarch of the family, he's a bit older than the rest of us, he was more like an uncle when I was a kid. She waited until Jeff arrived and got off his 20th EasyJet that month, whatever, and walked into the room, and she looked at him and she kind of sighed, and she was holding my hand, and she just, you can hear the death rattle, the breath, you know what it is, for some time before. And she just breathed and breathed heavier, and then just stopped. And it was shocking, because you felt like at that stage, having been around for months, you didn't ever think it was over. You thought, oh, God, this is what I'm going to do now for the rest of my life. It's why you feel guilty about thinking, well, let it be over. She's not going to get better. Please let it be over. But when it actually was over, it was just, it was brutal, the emptiness and the silence, and that it stopped, and none of us have really thought about what the next thing to do was. I remember the nurse had asked us to leave the room to let her go. That's right, she'd asked us to leave the room, and she obviously knew what she was doing. She was a wonderful woman, but I don't know, it didn't feel right to let, But we did leave the room, and we came back in, and my mum was hanging around. And I held her hand, and then my elder brother arrived, and then she went, and then the nurse said, oh, I need a few minutes. She let us sit there for a little bit, and so we went out into the little room next door, and she'd put some cake there for us and a little pot of tea. And it was just, I don't know, I felt an urge to run back in. I'd left my mum alone, but she wasn't there anymore. She wasn't there anymore. It was a very confusing day, that whole, a lot of the Jewish rituals, I think, make great sense. You're meant to sit for 7 days in the house with visitors coming every day and do prayers. And we're not religious at all, so we did 1 day. But after that 1 day, I was there and my wife and kids were there. And my wife goes, well, the kids want to go to the beach. And I went, yeah. She goes, do you want to come? And I was thinking, well, yeah, but it just feels, who am I being disrespectful to by taking my little kids to the beach? And so I appreciated the ritual a lot of enforced grief, so that when it's over, you're ready to go, not to go partying, but just to to leave the house, because you've sat in it with nothing else for a week, which I didn't get to do. But I didn't appreciate the fact that you bury someone the next day. She died at 10 o'clock at night, and we have to organise a funeral for 2 o'clock next afternoon. And it's mental. It's a mad scramble, I feel grateful that there was some structure. Like, we knew what we were meant to do. She would have wanted us to do, because that's what Jews have done for 5,000 years or something. Because in the absence of that, my family can't agree on what restaurant to go to at night, what should we watch on telly. But the big things like what to do when someone dies, we would torn each other apart. I was grateful that it was a structure.
I was just thinking back when you were talking about your mum's death and in the room and after she'd taken her last breath, and then the nurse came in, and how, you were asked to leave the room and then you got an opportunity to go back in. There was the tea and cake. Before your mum died, did anybody have a conversation with you, your brothers and your dad and family about what the end might be like and what kind of things you might expect? You talked about the death rattle. Did any of the staff or anybody talk about that?
No, I like the version you're describing. No, they didn't. I mean, it seemed obvious. First of all, my elder brother's a doctor. His son, who came to visit also, it was 5 days, I think, out of medical school, and walked in and went, "You need to put a morphine up, it's near the end." And, I've held him since he was a baby, and here he was, this young man. He took charge because his dad hadn't arrived yet, and he went to speak to the doctor, and he was right, because she was in that phase where you don't come back from, where the breathing goes a certain way. No, we had no conversation. My eldest brother is a very practical, pragmatic, unemotional. I mean, in terms of displaying it, of course he feels emotions in a way, and he was there or on the phone, just telling us what to do and how to do it. But we never talked about. We just presumed she'd fade. I mean, it was obvious. When you watch somebody turning skeletal and having greater difficulties with all their bodily functions and losing presence, just not being present, going slightly milky. At some point, that it's going to stop. No one had told us there'll be a death rattle. So that was a slight surprise, the raspiness of the breath. But apart from that, no one had told us anything. We hadn't asked.
I think sometimes I was just going to say that. I think, the people I certainly come across in the course of my work, I would say, you can ask if you want to. You can ask for information on dying and what it might look like or what it might be like. And of course, no one knows exactly what it's going to be like.
Sure.
But they can talk, professionals can talk you through what the process might be like. So sort of prepares you a little.
I think that we probably didn't want to ask for two reasons. One is that I have a brother there who's been around it a lot, who's a doctor, and son is a doctor, and so I just presumed, well, they're on top of that stuff. And then my dad, who's an interesting guy, has had many big health problems in his life. His heart has been rebuilt, 1,000 times. It's held together with string and sticky back plastic, and, he takes cocktails of drugs in the morning. Never asks the doctor what's going on. He never wants to know what's going on with his own body at all. Just give me a thing to fix it and don't talk about it. So he was there, my dad, through all this, and I think he didn't want to know or talk about death or think about it. You get to a certain age when all your friends are dying off and you're watching your wife die, and he didn't want to engage with it, wanted to engage with what we're having for lunch. And so it wouldn't have been a conversation that he wanted. Plus, I felt my brothers knew. So, it didn't feel a loss, In some ways, I was thinking about, what are we going to talk about today? And I was thinking that death is it's obviously the flip side of pregnancy. And when my wife was pregnant, the first time at least, so much conversation about the birth, the day of the birth, so much conversation, how it's going to come out. We did natural birth classes, and then she wanted to do them again. So we were the know-it-all experts the second time, and so much conversation about drugs and epidurals. And then a baby comes, and you think, oh, blimey. We were concentrating so much on opening the door, we weren't thinking about what's on the other side, which is the rest of your life with a child. And in a way, the moment of death, or even how it happens, whilst huge and can be very traumatic, my wife's father died in a much, much more traumatic way that she's had enormous difficulty coping with and processing. But for me, the loss of my mum, grief, has nothing to do with the actual moment of death or how it happened. It's to do with someone not being around in your life, not being around for moments that seem important, not being around for your kids to know, for echoes of them in conversations, or something rather wonderful happened that I've mentioned maybe few too many times, that my mum was difficult. It's because we rowed a lot. She rowed with everyone a lot in the family, and lots of drama in my life. But within a relatively short period of time, I could only recall the good memories. If you'd asked me when she was alive about my mum, I could have told you a bunch of stories that were maybe not kind to her, or maybe they're accurate, but she wouldn't have liked them. But all the good stuff started to come back. And it was, it's the opposite of that Mark Antony speech in Julius Caesar. He says, well, when he's dead, you only remember the evil things that people have done. The good lies interred with their bones. Well, actually, it's the opposite for me. I remember just lots of fond memories and lots of acts of love and stuff. And I don't think I was conscious of any of them when she was alive. I thought only of the things that had driven me nuts and the points at which we'd argued and how hard it was to get through any conversation. And so I think there's a lot of, this podcast is obviously about loss, but the moment of death seems to me in retrospect now much less important than the fact of absence, in my life, in my family's life, in my father's life. And that's, I don't know about harder to deal with. When you're dealing with a crisis or medical crisis, you muster up what's needed, hopefully. But when you deal with something much more intangible that is coming to all of us, when it's a parents, when it's a child, it's a different thing, or peers. I don't know how to process that. I think it's turned into something quite positive. I'm just so frustrated that she's not around to see good things that happen. I wish she could see her grandchildren. My daughter started Cambridge University. Frankly, it's a bit rubbish going to university now, but my mother would have just exploded with pride. And the memories that seem to disappear when someone goes, you go, there's all the things that happened to her that I know that she told me about her life. Have they gone now? Have they who will ever remember those things? I find that much harder or more complicated to deal with than what you're asking about, which is what happened in the room and, the noises you made and stuff. That stuff is just practical, and we are protected from it. I hadn't been around it. I was just so glad that I was able to do it, and it was as good a death as we could hope for. I don't know if it's as good a death as my mum could hope for. The best way to avoid, is to not die, But if you have to go, I guess, surrounded by the people you love, holding their hand with music you like and memories and photographs is probably, up there in the top 5.
The coronavirus pandemic has triggered a wave of bereavement across the country and taken away our ability to be with loved ones and grieve in traditional ways. Marie Curie's new Memory Cloud is an online space to reflect on a loved one's life and share special memories with your friends and family. Visit memorycloud.org.uk.
You talked about some of your experiences of grief and how it sounds like it's changed over time as well, and how now there's, maybe significant things will happen, like your daughter going to university. You kind of think about what your mum would have thought about that and how proud she would have been, and so maybe sort of times when you think about her more than others. What do you remember about your sort of experience of grief just after she died, Jason?
I remember because I've done a bit of work on myself in other contexts, forgiving myself for not thinking about it, or for going to the beach with my kids, or for laughing with my brothers. I remember thinking everything is all right. No one should feel guilty and feel bad for not feeling something or for feeling the wrong thing at the wrong time. Everything is all right. And that I knew everything would change. I knew that things, that there are moments of elation's wrong word. There are moments when you're high on life, and there's moments when you're not, and that none of it is predictable, and none of it should fit in a box. And being able, I think, to offer some of that to people around me. Partly, it's going to sound like a strange non sequitur. I'm an actor, and so I've played lots of soldiers. So I've been around a lot of people with trauma, with PTSD, and sometimes it manifests long time afterwards. 16 years, they say, is the average for people who've been in a war. And there is no right or wrong way for it to come out. It can be a supermarket that sets someone off. It can be a children's cry. It can be, it can be bright lights or the wrong type of music, and it can be years after the original trauma or seemingly entirely unrelated to it. And so I just remember thinking, no one should judge each other or themselves by how we're reacting to this. And the fact that I'm not thinking about it that much now, or in fact I'm not walking around feeling that miserable, is maybe because I've been in that room for a couple of months, and I'm glad not to be in the room. And now with my kids, there's joy and there's laughter, and that all of it is okay. The only thing that isn't okay, the reason I mentioned PTSD, is it is completely natural to come back from a war zone and be jumpy. It is not right. You shouldn't be somewhere where someone lifting a mobile phone could end your life and the lives of the people you love, and then be okay being in a restaurant with people lifting mobile phones. It would be unnatural if you did. There is a period of time during which you should make an adjustment to your new reality. And anyone who isn't making an adjustment is avoiding something. And then there's it taking too long, or the scars never healing, or a wound staying open. And that's the time to seek different kinds of help. I think where you go, look, there's no rule. Give yourself 6 months, and if you're still miserable after 6 months, But it's also true that death is natural. It's part of life. Losing a parent is natural too, and when and if your reaction to it doesn't feel to other people and to yourself, like it's proportionate, then you need to think about it, because some people grieve for years. And their lives are massively compromised. And if I know anything about my mum, and certainly me when I go, I don't want people to be miserable for years, because they might get run over by a bus. I want them to live their life. So the question was, what did I feel? I felt like whatever I was feeling was okay. And I was right, because I didn't feel that much at the time. I was thinking, I'm going to go back to work filming, and I'm going to arrange this funeral. And I was upset at the funeral, of course. The waves of it came on the day, and we had to look at the body in the coffin, which was monstrous, and no one had warned us, and they didn't do any kind of preservation. So my mum looked, I thought, oh God, that's how I'm going to think for the rest of my life, like something from a horror film. But actually, I don't. But I just remember thinking, should I feel guilty that I'm having fun with my kids, and I've gone to the beach with my kids or whatever, ended this as a holiday in a way? No, and I was right not to, I think, not because there is a quota for grief and that I got mine later, but because there is no wrong reaction, and so my mum was ready to go. She'd been not right in her head for quite a long time, and then she was not right physically for a long time, and so no part of me thinks, I wish she was still around, because I'm able to go, if she was around, she'd be rotten with cancer and more demented and more unhappy. So I wasn't laid low. My wife's father was gone, and she was broken, just utterly broken by it. But I wasn't broken by my mum. And I like to think that's because it was a healthier reaction, that if you've done things right and you've made your relationship right with people and you're right with the world, then it's sad, but it shouldn't stop your life. But then even using the word shouldn't seems inappropriate. So I was fine. The answer is I was fine, and then moments came around when I wasn't fine, and then I was fine again. And it's changed over time, and I haven't fallen to the floor tearing my hair out and sobbing, but I don't know if that's a consequence of me or who my mum was, or our relationship. I'd feel that way if I lost a child, I think, or my wife. That would be a very different thing.
What was your mum's name, Jason?
My mum's name was Linda Isaacs, although that's not what's on her passport. She was Sheila Linda Isaacs. She went to school, and the first day the teacher went, right, we've got 5 Sheilas, you'll be Linda. And so she was called by a middle name all of her life. It was the first of, maybe that's the smallest injustice that was done to her. There were many others in her life, but they fueled this remarkable woman, so just as well.
I'm going to change direction a little bit and ask a different question in a second, but I wanted to thank you for sharing your story about your mum. And, I was really, while you've been talking, not just about the story of your mum's death, but also your own grief, I kind of couldn't help but put myself in that seat where people who are listening to it, who might be grieving or caring for somebody who's dying, and just how helpful all that stuff you talked about is. I think for somebody who's listening, there's something about normalizing death and dying.
Listen, I'm 57 years old. I don't know many people who've got 2 parents alive. At my age, your parents are going to die. We're going to die. I'm going to die too. I'm terrified of it. I don't like to think about it, engage with it. But I mean, anyone who's listening who's dealing with it, it's awful. And anything you think or feel is absolutely fine. If you think, God, I wish they were dead tomorrow, or I hope they'll live forever and my life will be empty and ruined without them. First of all, the only thing constant is change. So this too shall pass. Everything changes, and it's okay. Whatever you're dealing with is absolutely fine, and any of your thoughts are fine. That's the thing. Thoughts aren't actions for a start. So, we've all driven down the road thinking, God, I could just swerve this car into that line of traffic. Well, you didn't. You thought it. That's absolutely okay. If you're obsessed with it, then go and seek some help. But, I hope everybody or anybody who listens, I don't think I have any wisdom to offer anyone, but just my experience was because I was a drug addict when I was younger, and so I'm not dealt with, but I've engaged with a kind of journey of the self. One of the things that I've learned from other people's wisdom is everything is all right. All the things that you're thinking are okay, unless you're taking actions which are destructive to other people or yourself. It's all right. There's no rule for what you should be thinking or feeling, and it'll happen in time.
And I think also when you're grieving, you've got enough to deal with without the additional, baggage of guilt. And so I think there's just something about just go easy on yourself as well.
I mean, look, my mum going, I don't feel bad saying this, I'm all right with it. I was all right with it because she was ready to go and because I had been prepared. She was not well for a long time, and my dad was trapped caring for someone who was really, really, he wasn't drawing on a bank of 60 years of hallmark romantic love. They'd had a fractious relationship anyway, and now she's very difficult at the end. So part of my mum going was a relief for her. I could feel her fear in every conversation that the abyss of her mind would be exposed. I could always feel that towards the end. And also relief for my dad that he didn't have to do that anymore. And, I don't feel bad for not feeling bad. I miss her sometimes, but I don't miss how she was at the end. I miss some version of her from long ago. And if your life is empty and you feel an enormous weight on your shoulders and the pain of loss, I feel terribly sorry for you. That hasn't been my experience, and I don't feel bad about not feeling that. And I empathise with anyone else who is feeling that. And if at some point it's too much and out of proportion, like anything in life, there are loads of people who can help professionally. They've seen it a million times. We've all only experienced it once. There are people who see patients, clients, customers, whatever, all the time, and they can help.
Do you think about your own death?
Only now you're asking. Yeah, I do, I suppose. And I do that thing that 12-year-olds do of thinking, it's 400 years away. Although I wake up creaky in the morning, I stupidly have done lots of my own stunts in my working life as an actor, and I'm now paying the price for it. And I don't know how I was Matthew McConaughey, the American actor. His father died making love to his mother in that kind of cliched way. That's from a Roger McGough poem, and I don't know, I want to inflict that on my wife. But I think less about how I die, because it's not a pleasant thing. It's very, I don't want to fade slowly in enormous pain. I hope the pain relief will be great. I suppose when I think about it, if I think about it at all, the action of death, the methodology of it, it seems to be binary. Do I want to go suddenly by accident, the bungee snaps or the car goes off the road, or do I want to have time to say goodbye to everybody and get sick and fade? And I'm still on the fence on that one. I don't know. But I know, having listened to your podcast, that you ask about what's your legacy, what you want to leave behind you. And so I don't want to get ahead of your questions. I presume you're going there somewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But dude, please, I'm really pleased to hear you've listened to a few as well, Jason. That's great.
Yeah, no, they're great. They're very comforting and interesting. And most podcasts are, people touting their latest book or television program or whatever, philosophy. And it's just nice to listen to people have serious conversations about important things that will come to all of us. But no, I don't think about my death itself because I won't have any control over it anyway. I'm probably take too many risks in life physically because I like it. I go too fast down the side of a mountain or jump off things I shouldn't or whatever. And I hope not to be in massive pain, obviously. I hope to be able to give some comfort to my kids. But what I really think about is what's going to happen after I die. What will I leave? But not professionally. I couldn't give a monkey's. I don't care even now when I do things, whether anybody ever sees a film or television program or, I wouldn't like to go out on stage in the theatre with nobody having bought a ticket because that would be embarrassing. But, I do it because I'm curious about human nature and I love exploring people. What are the building blocks of personalities and choices and actions? And I crave the interesting social interaction with the other people I'm doing it with. So the net result I don't care about. And if no one ever knew that I was an actor, it's so enormously unimportant. The only thing that's important to me is not even how I live on in the lives and choices of my children, because I don't want them to be thinking, oh, Dad would have done this, Dad would have done that. I just hope that I have passed on things that are useful to them, that help them, that allow them to live good, fulfilling lives and be kind and seek out people who are kind to them. And you do that by actions, not words. I mean, it doesn't stop me lecturing them all the time if they'll listen. But the only thing I will want to have passed on is a way to navigate through what I suspect will be a much trickier existence than I've had. I think the next generation is going to be hard. I mean, if things are not getting better in the world, particularly on many different metrics. So that I just want to leave behind fond memories if they think of me, and great choices that lead to them feeling good about themselves and doing good in the world. And that's, that will be more than enough. I'm much more concerned about the actual arrangements, what to do, what the ceremony will be, where we'll get back. I'm Jewish, my wife's not. I don't really care about religion at all, but some bizarre tribal link makes me worry about not doing something ritually Jewish when I'm dead, as if I'll care,
Have you had those conversations with your wife? I mean, is any of that written down?
No. I mean, we did. My wife and I don't avoid talking about proper things, like I did growing up in my family, but we just can't decide on anything. And I guess we don't want to think that we're going to die soon. My parents bought plots in a cemetery near them, just as a practical thing, because they were expensive. They were going up or something. But we are far from having made sensible arrangements. I'm glad that our kids are growing up. They're 18 and 15 now, and within a few years we won't have to worry about who would be the guardian, and if there was any money left at all, who would administrate and that stuff, because we couldn't agree on any of it. And I guess we didn't even really want to think about it. But yeah, so the admin and bureaucracy of death and its aftermath we haven't dealt with at all. But I do think about it, and I hope that by living right or making the right choices, my kids will be able to live with themselves in ways that make them comfortable enough to fall asleep at night without regret. If you can lie there in bed when the lights go off and go, that wasn't a bad day, I did the best I could do, it wasn't just all for me, and the things I did wrong I'm going to make right tomorrow, that's a good day.
I think one of the reasons we do the podcast, is to encourage people to have conversations about death and dying, and part of that encouragement is for people to think about their own deaths or have conversations with their families about death and what they might want, and then make some plans or write some things down or tell people.
That's very sensible.
And of course, I'm not suggesting you have them conversations every Sunday at 2:00.
No, you're right.
But maybe a one-off.
No, but you're right. We haven't done it, and we should do. And I tell you I studied law originally before I became an actor, and I remember so little of it. I can barely remember how to spell the word law. But one of the areas that I remember being fascinating was testate. When people die without a will, or a will is argued over and challenged, and families tear themselves apart over a chest of drawers. It's not the giant sums of money, or because it's really nothing to do with the items mostly or money. It's far more to do with the emotional fault lines in the family that come out. And we were quite, for a family that argue a lot, we were quite good about gravestone and what's be on it, and even how many sandwiches we should get for the people who came on the day after. You could feel the underlying tension. Then at some point, I had a row with my elder brother about loading the car up with suitcases, and we nearly came to blows. And it was just so weird that suddenly there was this real viciousness from him and me. Obviously nothing to do with the suitcases in the car at all. And we nearly started punching each other. So it can be the smallest, slightest things. So you're absolutely right. Of course, it would be great to settle things like arrangements for a funeral, what you like, and the music, and the buried or cremated, all this stuff. the more difficult things are around if I'm incapacitated. You ask people to do things that are illegal. Will you switch my machines off? Will you smother me? I don't know if people really would. And do you really want that at that point? If you could live, but you're physically compromised. You can think that you wouldn't like to live at times like. I remember my mother saying, if I'm ever, if I can't move or I can't speak, kill me. I do remember her saying that. I wouldn't want to live, but I don't know that anyone takes it seriously, because who knows what you want in those moments. It's like that. I have quite a few friends who are journalists, and one of my bugbears that absolutely destroys me is when a proper serious journalist that does an important job in the world asks someone how they're going to feel when something happens. How do you know? Nobody knows how they're going to feel when something happens. That's the point about human emotions. So it is best, you're right, I'm sure, to make as many of the arrangements as firm as possible. But I haven't. I will try. Maybe I will use this conversation as inspiration to begin to make those plans. But my wife and I have had 33 years of bickering together. Hopefully we'll have another 33. We never agree on anything. And that's like a sofa or what to have for dinner. So I don't know. I wonder how close we'll come to consensus on the big issues.
And there may be consensus, there might not be. You might want different things. You might not want the same things from your death. You, as you just described earlier, you've kind of come from, like lots of people come from different backgrounds with maybe different religious or cultural influences. And so it's a joint conversation and a family conversation, but I think it's an individual wish, isn't it?
It is. I mean, if I think about it properly, and I'm completely honest with myself, it doesn't matter. And so whether they dance down the aisle to Bob Marley, or whether I'm cremated, or whether they, take me out and let the wolves eat me on Hampstead Heath, it really doesn't make the slightest bit of difference. And it feels to me like a bit of ego going, I'll curate it so well. You go, God, he threw a good funeral for himself. I love that, and he had the toad in the hole, which he always liked. I don't know. And once you've gone, it's really for the people who are left. Remember, it should be best they get together and go, well, how can we best remember him? What will remind us most of him? In the course of my professional life, a few times, I've had to play people who are still alive, play real life characters. And I've spoken to them or met them, and you ask them to tell you about themselves. And it's a woefully inaccurate picture of themselves. Or rather, you then ask their relatives and their friends and their enemies, and they go, he's nothing like that. That's not what he does. And so, planning your own funeral is like trying to leave a little, style stamp on the world. But really, who knows till you get there, how you want your death to be, how you want the process to be. You can predict all you like. Switch me off early, I don't want to be seen fading. And then you're there and you go, no, I want to see my children tomorrow. I want to see my grandchildren tomorrow. I want to watch another episode of Holby City. One more, So yes, inspired by you, I will have the conversation. I don't know where we'll get, and I'm sure it's very useful. But the main reason to have it is because otherwise the people who are left, you're giving them ammunition to have stupid arguments that are not about that at all, because they'll be feeling so tense and so upset. And that's the main reason to settle these things, is to allow people like I had, because of how Jewish my mum was. We went, okay, this is exactly what's meant to happen. It's prescribed, so we can do that, and these are the things that you're meant to say. And so there was no room to argue about them, and that was a relief.
I was just thinking there when you were talking, I was reminded of when I was younger, and my dad would always say to me, my brother, and I was like really young. I mean, sort of probably 7, 8. And it was really important to them that my brother and I knew where the tin was. And there was a tin in the wardrobe with a will in and some other bits of paper.
Yeah, my mum, that's right. My mum used to say to me, if they come again, I'll have swallowed the jewellery. She didn't really have any jewellery. She had nothing worth a penny, really. But what she meant was, if the Nazis come, I will have swallowed it. The Nazis come to Israel. I do know. I mean, who knows? But never say never nowadays with the madness going on in the political world. But she said it more than once in my life when I was a kid. I was thinking, so you're saying some Nazis have come, they've killed you, they left the body. It's very kind of them, and I should cut open your stomach to find these, frankly, not very valuable pieces of jewellery. Okay, thanks for that, Mum. We can probably let that one to rest.
As you said, usually at this point, I'd probably start to talk about legacy and after death, but I think we've already touched on that. Jason, just before we do finish today, can I ask what it's meant for you to be able to share your story today on the Marie Curie Couch?
I feel some relief I guess it goes back to what I said right at the beginning. You know, we were talking about my mum dying, and I had a very difficult relationship with my mum. A lot of people did. And her death brought me some comfort because of the lucky way it happened, that I was able to be there, and that she turned very, very sweet at the end and wasn't argumentative anymore. But I learnt from her that if you are of use, of service anywhere, that is the deepest satisfaction you can have. And so I don't know if it's been abuse of people to listen to me say any of this, but the one thing I hope people take from it, that I forgive myself a lot in life. Doesn't mean I give myself license to behave badly, but particularly when it comes to emotions and thoughts which aren't actions, that what it's meant to me is I feel relieved and glad, and that it's been a privilege to share with people that they should not feel bad for anything that they feel. There's no, this is not it's not a Meccano kit, and the way we're all put together inside, and the sum total of things that have happened to us and how they emerge. Just never feel bad about it, and allow them to come out, and you have no idea what's going to happen over time. The people who are sobbing on the day, and someone else who isn't crying and you think is hard-hearted, no idea what's going on inside you or anybody else. And so that it's been a privilege to talk about it for myself, and also the faint notion that it might have provided any comfort to anybody else who are living through these very difficult experiences. And by the way, I'm here because Marie Curie does amazing things, and when people don't have the family members around or willing or available, they provide love. Yeah, they provide care and stuff. They provide a rest and a break for people if they have carers. But in the absence of that, towards the end of life, they help the end to be as serene and beautiful and loving as they can be. And so I'm here to support them, and anyone listening, if you choose to support them, is supporting a really wonderful organisation.
Jason Isaacs, thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So that's all for this episode of On the Marie Curie Couch. We hope it's got you thinking about matters of life and death, and perhaps starting those conversations with your own friends and family. Marie Curie's here to help. From planning ahead to coping with bereavement, you can talk through any concerns you have around the end of life with our support line team, which also includes specially trained nurses. Call us on 0800 090 2309 or search Marie Curie online. This podcast is made by Marie Curie, a national charity that supports people affected by terminal illness. For more information and support, you can visit our website, mariecurie.org.uk. The podcast is produced and edited by Marie Curie with support from Ultimate Sound and Vision. The music featured is Time Lapse by Panoceanic. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do like and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and until next time, goodbye.